So far, we've had a look at two of Sony's G Master zoom lenses. The Sony 16-35 f2.8, which is a brilliant compact wide-angle lens, and their super telephoto 100-400mm. Today, we're having a look at their telephoto lens, the 70-200mm f2.8 GM, and we're going to see what it's all about. So there are many reasons why you would want to own a 70-200mm. Firstly, to be able to reach places where you can't either A, normally get to, or reach a place without disturbing the subjects that you're shooting from a far distance away. This is great for wildlife photographers, as well as people who are looking to do compression landscapes where rocks or any kind of formation is super far away from them, which they physically do not want to walk to. You can get some pretty nice compressed looking landscapes using a telephoto lens. In addition, the 70-200mm f2.8 is a great lens for portraits. Not only do you get the shallow depth of field from f2.8, but you also get the effects of compression to really give your subject that extra pop from the background. So my first impressions on the design of the Sony 70-200mm f2.8 G Master. Now, comparatively, compared to DSLR 70-200mm, the Sony one is quite small. However, that's not to say that this lens is a small lens, because it's not. It's quite big and weighs 1.5 kilograms, meaning it is going to be quite heavy to carry it around all day. What we'd recommend for you to do is to get an added grip or some kind of battery grip to help support the weight and really to evenly distribute it, as the Sony cameras are quite small. Secondly, in terms of the actual functions you have on the lens, there are 4 switches on the left-hand side. So you have an autofocus to manual focus selector, you've got a focus limiter. Speaking of focus, you do have 3 focus hold buttons as well on the lens. Thirdly, you've got 2 switches for optical image stabilization. So the first switch turns on and off the stabilization in the lens, which the stabilization works with the in-body image stabilization if your Sony camera does have it. And lastly, you've got a mode switch for the image stabilization. So the first mode being for general everyday usage, and the second mode being specifically for panning, which is great for people who do, for example, action photography. Ergonomically, the lens does feel really good in your hands to use, as it's quite comfortable. And to add to that comfort level, you've got 2 large, well rubberized rings. The first ring being your focal length ring, and the second one being your focus ring. And the focus ring does feel quite smooth and well resisted, so if you are going to be using it for video or general manual focus use, it is quite good for that. And lastly, you'll notice that on my lens currently, it doesn't have a little thing sticking at the bottom, as I've taken off the tripod mount. The tripod mount on the Sony 70-200mm is easily removable, and this is really good for people who, like myself, who are not going to be using a tripod today out on a shoot. So just to cut back on some weight and cut back on some really uncomfortable ergonomics at some times, you can just easily remove it and pop it back on when you need to. So at the moment, I'm just taking photos of these pigeons. Autofocus works pretty well. They're not moving, so it's not having too much of a hard time taking focus. And it's quite accurate. I'm shooting at around 200mm. Everything's pretty stable. At the moment, I've got the in-body image stabilization of the camera, as well as the image stabilization from the lens. So it's quite stable at 200mm, which is incredible. So now I'm just going to run over the features of the Sony 70-200mm f2.8 G Master lens. So first off, it's got a maximum aperture of f2.8 and a minimum aperture of f22 throughout the focal length, giving you versatile performance in multiple lighting scenarios and depth of field control. In terms of its bokeh, it does have an 11 rounded blade aperture diaphragm, so you're going to get some pretty nice creamy results. Secondly, the lens is constructed with a floating element construction, giving you optimal sharpness and clarity. And to top it off, the lens is zoomed internally within the barrel, so none of the parts protrude, and gives you a nicer compact design. In addition, if you do want to take the lens out on a rough day, then it is dust and moisture resistant. Thirdly, there are 3 aspherical elements and 1 XA element to help reduce chroma and monochromatic aberrations. In addition to that, there are 4 super low dispersion elements and 2 super ED elements to help with aberrations and color fringing. Fourthly, the lens is double coated. The first coating being a fluorine coating to help with smudges, fingerprints, and basically to fight against the elements. And secondly, it's got a nano AR coating to help fight against surface reflections and glare. And lastly, in the lens, there is a supersonic wave motor for quiet and fast autofocus operation. So now I'm just going to talk about my performance impressions on the Sony 70-200mm f2.8 G Master. Now there are a lot of things I do like about this lens and some things I feel can improve the overall experience of the lens. First off, let's talk about the weight. Now it does weigh 1.5 kilograms, which is damn heavy. So at times, if you're going to be using this for a long period of time, just to save your wrists as well as just the overall comfort balance of the system, I highly recommend getting a grip or a battery grip to help you out. Secondly, what I do like a lot about it is the focus hole buttons on the actual lens. So you basically have 3 extra buttons on the lens which are well placed for you to change multiple functions on your camera. Now for moments where you can't really take your camera off your face just to change settings in a high-paced environment, this comes in really handy. Speaking of high-paced environments, the autofocus is really good on the lens. In most cases, it's super quick and it's quite reliable. Now at times, I did feel like in darker scenarios, it did tend to hunt a bit, but it wasn't the case most of the time. And lastly, in scenarios like wildlife photography where you can't really make a sound, the autofocus motor in the lens is super silent, so you won't have to worry about that. Now let's have a look at the images we shot today. We paired the Sony 70-200mm G Master today with a Sony a7R Mark III. The Sony 70-200mm was paired up with the Sony a7R III. The images that come out of this lens are fantastic. It has amazing sharpness from the center to the edge of the frame. The sharpness quality is quite consistent throughout the focal length of the lens. There is a low amount of distortion at about 70mm and low vignetting present in the lens. Both of these can easily be corrected with a simple profile correction in Lightroom. Flaring performance is quite good on it as well, which just means that the coatings are doing their job. Bokeh on the 70-200mm is super smooth and is quite nice, and looks especially better with the effects of compression. Optically, there really isn't anything to fault on the lens and is definitely a must-have for any telephoto lens user. So my final thoughts on the Sony 70-200mm f2.8 G Master. Now the biggest downfall of this lens is not its weight or its size, but it's definitely the price tag. Over the last 2 years, the price has stayed the same and it costs around 3,500 Australian, which means it won't be a lens that's accessible for everyone. Now, if you are a telephoto user and you really love using that focal length between 70-200mm, then we highly recommend the 70-200mm G Master lens. Its optical quality, its performance is unrivaled and unmatched in its class and definitely a must-have for any telephoto lover on the Sony system. If you have any questions on the lens, pop them in the comments below. Make sure to follow us on our Facebook, Instagram, and our blog, which links to those are in our description below, so you can keep up to date with what's going on in store and full written reviews on every product that goes through this channel. And as always, hit the like button and the subscribe button so you don't miss out on our next update as we upload weekly. So, fourthly, the lens is double coated. First, it's got a fluorine coating to help with smudging and fingerprints and to battle weather conditions. Yeah, battle weather. Oh, it's raining, dude!